Okay, so let's go through a few things here. Our agenda today, we do have a few demos. We have two where we're going to build a process, or more specifically, Samrat's going to build that out for us. But make sure you stick around to the end because we are going to also show building a connector with Connector Builder. So for those of you that have APIs that we don't have a connector to, that's exactly what you'll want to use. So Samrat's going to take us through actually doing that as well with an example. So I guess you could call it 3 demos is what we're going to go through over the course of the next 40-45 minutes or so. For those of you that are a little bit newer, so I saw there was people that weren't customers yet. Some people were Automation Cloud customers or not Automation Cloud customers. So not everyone's active on integration service. So for those of you that this might be new, let me just cover a couple of things for you before we get to the demo. Integration service is UiPath's way of automating APIs. We want to make sure that you're using similar tooling to how you would do UI automation. So you do activities for clicking and typing and reading and writing on screens. We want you to be able to use those same skills that you've built as an RP professional to automate APIs without having to execute REST calls, parse JSON, write code, any of those things. So we want those as drag and drop activities into your studio. We provide a large library of connectors that are pre-built by UiPath, which someone's going to take us through some of those today. And we provide the ability for you to custom create your own connectors for those APIs. Those APIs can be, brought into a process that started manually. So some of the more traditional methods that you might be familiar with, but we can also start those processes based off of events and backend systems. We call those triggers. Samrat's again going to show us some of that. And then there's some capabilities around governing those connections, governing those APIs, and managing those in a centralized place in Automation Cloud. We'll show a little bit of that, but there is a lot more that we can go into in a separate session. We do see APIs being automated in a number of ways with our customers. So you'll see things like API to API, which is what we're going to focus on today. Document to API, that's where we're bringing in document understanding and using that content to automate things through an API in a different system. Samrat's also going to do that today. And then bringing in robots, matching those against APIs, bringing in humans and allowing humans to make decisions that are executing those APIs, things like that. But we're not going to focus as much on those today. And then I think pretty importantly, where can you use integration service? We're going to stay focused on Studio Web today, but integration service is becoming a product in all parts of the platform. So you'll see it more and more and more, regardless of whether you focus more on apps or you focus more on Studio or you're an administrator or you're just working in Automation Hub, you'll start to see that API integration come through. But that being said, I don't want to take up too much time. So Samrat, let's get to you. Let's start building out some of those demos.
Sure, absolutely. And I am facing some power cuts. But yeah. Okay, so let me share my screen. All right. So I hope my screen is visible. Really excited. Great. Really excited to be here. And what's more exciting is that, like Roy said, we are going to walk through a very nascent project, UiPath Studio Web, that we released a couple months back. We started rolling it out, I believe. So all the demos that we are going to build today are going to be on Studio Web. Now, coming to the topics, we are going to cover a couple of use cases. One use case will be, how to leverage the OpenAI connector and activity pack that we have released of late, while in the context of translating different languages and stuff like that. The second use case, again, it's very interesting, and it's also something which Uber already does. So what we are going to do is automate expenses into Concur. And last but not the least, the connector builder, which is also an exciting piece, since, like Roy already mentioned, you can just to go and build your own connector, have your own activity pack published, and bring it onto Studio Desktop or Studio Web to create your own automations, right? And with that, we will start with the first use case, which is using OpenAI. Um, okay, so I'm inside Studio Web. If you are aware of it, great. But this is the landing page of Studio Web. So first things first, we need to create a new project. So let's name it Dev Dives 1. And whatever we build at the end of the session, we will be sharing these downloadable packages as well so that you can import and work with these, right? Okay, so the moment you are inside Studio Web, you get to see a trigger option automatically. My use case is very simple. So when I receive an email address, let's say a customer request in a language other than English, maybe French, right? I'm going to translate the content of the email to a language that I am familiar with, which is obviously English. And with that content, I'm going to create a Jira issue. And then we are going to reply back to the customer with the Jira issue that we created, the key of the issue. Also, needless to mention, if the email has any attachment, you're also going to attach the same to the Jira ticket. So in a nutshell, that's going to be my use case. And we will showcase how the OpenAI connector can help us in translating the content, right, from French to English. Okay, so with that, we are going to switch to event trigger. Uh, just for your information, right now in Studio Web, we support 3 kinds of triggers. One is manual, one is time-based, and the other one is event triggers. Time-based, let's say you want to schedule your workflow runs weekly or monthly, so you can use the time triggers. But event triggers are more interesting because you get to see, let's say if I choose Jira, you will have all the triggers for Jira. But here we are going to explicitly look at Outlook. So all you need to type in is just Outlook and you get all the triggers that we have enabled for Outlook, right? So I'll quickly choose email received. Great. So I already have a connection here for Outlook, but in case you want to create a new connection, you can just click on this gear icon and hit the add new connection, and you'll be redirected to the vendor's authorization URL, to be specific, right? The first and foremost thing that we need to do while configuring this activity is choosing the email folder. And we are going to keep it simple. Let's just say I'm going to receive the email in my inbox. You can play around with these activities, like if you want to filter out the attachments or return the body of the email as HTML, stuff like that. But what's going to be useful here are the additional filters, because using this, we can filter the triggers right from the activity. So what I'm going to do is filter it out based on my own email address. Optionally, you can add conditions. So let's also add subject, contents, issue. All right, so we are done configuring the event trigger, right? Now coming to the OpenAI part, again, we can search with OpenAI and you get all the activities that has this OpenAI text, right? So we are going to use the chat completion activity from OpenAI. Again, I already have a connection, but in case you want to add one, you can just click on this. So for saving some time, I already have saved my prompts. So, and this will be very interesting to follow. Let's see how we can kind of, set up the prompts, right? Because that's the key part of how you want to leverage OpenAI, right? So first of all, what we are going to do is identify the language, the language of the email, right? So we are just going to say, tell me what the language of this text is. And we are going to pass the body of the email, because most likely that's where the customer would actually write the problem, right? So just configuring it likewise. Optionally, you can also set some instructions within the activity. So I don't want OpenAI to respond back with anything other than the language. So I'm instructing as such. Let's also rename this activity to something useful. Detect language. The next step is we are going to, again, actually, it's a lot simpler. So if you go to copy, you can get this activity at the top, which we are going to use as the next step also. And here we are going to translate from French or from Japanese to English. So let's rename it, translate in English. Obviously, we are going to change the prompts. Clearing the value and just opening the expression editor. It's very similar to Studio, sorry. And even here, we are going to configure it with the body preview. Yep, we have it here. Missed the plus. Great. And we don't need this anymore, so just clearing it. Great. So at this point in time, we are done with detecting the language and also translating the language to English. The next thing that we are going to do is create a Jira issue. So you can just type in Jira and you get all the activities, just like we saw in case of OpenAI. Select create issue activity. Now, while this loads and loads the activity, I really wanted to, highlight one thing, that over the last couple of months, we have spent a lot of effort on making sure that the Jira activity, basically we received a lot of feedbacks because the way the fields are exposed, the properties are exposed in Jira, that's not conventional. So if you go to Jira UI, you first get to choose if you are aware of Jira, obviously, you first need to choose the project, then the issue type, and based on that combination, you get the fields, that you can create, that you can use during a create or update, right? That's how Jira works. So we have tried to duplicate um, that very experience, and we have tried to embed it within our activity as well. So let's see how it works. So we first need to enter the project name. So in our case, it's integration service. And now we saw that the issue type, we have a cascading effect, right? So based on the project that you selected, you can now select the issue types. So let's select bug. For the summary, we are just going to stick to the email subject. That's the property we are going to use. And for the description, obviously, we are going to use the translated text, right? So from this activity's output, we are just going to select top generated text. You can also see the additional options. Basically, it all depends on the number of fields you have created. So all the fields you have within the create issue screen, you should expect them to see here as well. The output of the activity is issue ID and issue key. Okay, so at this point in time, we are also done with creating the issue in Jira. Now comes the part when we respond back to the customer in the language that the email was sent to us, right? So again, OpenAI to the rescue, using the same activity, generate chat completion, and let's rename it to something like create creating email response. Great. And what we are going to prompt is this, right? Basically just notifying the customer that we have received the request and we are working on it. Jira reference : next to it, we are going to add the Jira key that we created, the issue key we created, right? For the instruction, we are going to say translate in. Now comes the part where you get to understand why we detected the language at first, right? Because here we will just say, choose the output of the detect language step. So this way, it will just translate the entire instruction to French or Japanese, whatever it was. Awesome. So now, obviously, the replying part. So we just choose the reply to email activity from Outlook. For the email context, it's really easy. Just go to the email received output and select the received email property. And for the body of the email, all we need to do is, choose the create email response. That should already be in some other language. And also the issue key, right? So basically it gets added just after, the issue key gets added just after the colon. There are a couple of options like save as draft. You don't want to do it. And you can really play around with all this stuff. But what we are going to do next is also upload attachments if the email had something, right? So we are again going to use Outlook. You can do more filter, let's say download. And you get the download email attachments. The configuration is very similar to how we configured the reply to email. So again, we are going to select received email and exclude inline attachments. Perhaps yes, because I don't want to include signatures and stuff like that. You might have those things, right? That's it. And this is the last step. For Jira, we need to upload the attachments. And this is a very interesting part because Studio Web is actually going to automatically add a for each loop for you. We'll see how. There you go. So once we download the attachment, we see Studio Web automatically added this, right? There seems to be some error, but we should be able to resolve it. So the issue is not selected. For this, we will just select the issue key because that's where we want to upload the file, right? Create issue key. Well, that's it. Now I will impersonate a customer. Subject, issue. Let's attach something. Maybe this. And also I have a French text already with me, which I'm going to use in this demonstration and send it to me, to myself. Okay, great. I'm going to wait for a couple of seconds until it arrives in my sandbox. Great. And I'll drag it to my inbox. That's where the event should trigger, right? So I dragged it there. Okay, great. I think we should have it in my inbox. Yep. All we need to do is run the activity. So if OpenAI wasn't here, we would essentially need to use Microsoft Translate, which comes with a cost, if I'm not wrong, or Google Translate. But with OpenAI, things have become so much easy, right? So that's definitely a good thing. While it runs in Studio, we see the an indicator where the workflow is at right at this moment. Great, looks like it has run successfully. It has replied to the email with something in French. Let's go figure out what this means. Translate to English. Yep, so that's good, right? Now let's also check how the ticket looks like in Jira, right? Because essentially we would have the context in English plus the attachments. Great. So that's what the customer emailed. My laptop heats up fast, and also the attachment I selected. So yeah, pretty much fun, right? We will take up any questions that you have at the end. But for the sake of saving some time, we will move ahead with our next workflow building. Okay, same, we are going to start with creating a project, dev types 2. Before I went into details of the activity pack, I would first like to explain one really nice feature for of integration service, which is actually connection sharing. So let me go to integration service first. We are going to club the workflow with the connection service. So once you have dropped into the integration service space within Automation Cloud, you will see that your connections are kind of segregated in the context of folders. So from the orchestrator, I believe you should be already aware that you can create your own folders, right? And that context is being brought in integration service as well. So you can create a folder, share these folders with a group or use individual users, and obviously you can assign permissions, but within the context of integration service, you can actually create connections within a folder, right? So you can see I have a Conquer connection, and anyone who has been invited into the folder, they can access all these connections. Now, imagine a scenario where only administrators have the ability to create connections. With this feature, they can actually share connections to a group of users. Perhaps they can also be administrators, or to non-administrators with a few scopes, right? So this actually the connection sharing is a great feature, and we can combine it with another feature that's something which we are trying to release, which is bringing your own OAuth app. But yeah, I mean, this is something we are going to use in our next workflow. So going back to Studio and to the same project. Okay, and here also we are going to use the same trigger to not overcomplicate things. So just type in Outlook, email received. This one's going to be easier because you already have the context of how to configure this activity. Again, selecting inbox, setting up some additional filters, just like I did previously. So from my email address, adding another condition. Subject, if it contains expense. And the next step of the activity is downloading the email attachments. So basically, let's say, a vendor like Uber, or maybe from some hotel, you get expense receipts, right? Periodically for expenses you have done on the company credit card, right? So the intent here is, once you receive those emails, we will be able to, kind of do our in-house OCR, extract data from those receipts and pass it to Concur to create expenses. Isn't that great? So that's why we are using the download email attachments. I'm sorry, I selected the wrong activity. It should be download email attachments. And very similar to the last activity we configured from Outlook, just choosing received email, exclude inline attachments. Well, that's true. And next, we are going to use the document understanding activity, extract document data. For the input file, we are going to use here output of the downloaded attachments. So it automatically creates a for each loop, right? Which is great. And you only have one option, since the project is in the context of the current Studio Web project. Coming to the extractor, you have quite a few options actually. And we have kind of modeled all these options based on, I mean, it can be region specific, it can be document specific. So as you see, invoices, receipts, purchase orders, ID cards. So all you need to make sure that you are passing the correct format of the document, and let document understanding activity do the magic, right? So for this use case, we are going to use receipts, obviously. And you can right away see what kind of fields you can get, right? The extracted fields are vendor name, vendor address, phone number, total amount, tax amount, etc. The next step is actually adding a Concur expense. So we will just type in Concur. That's the activity, add quick expense. Now, this is the part where we get to see the shared connection, right? So now you can understand that there was a parent folder, which is Samrat Datta's own workspace. And within that, I had a folder that said shared with Roy. And that is the connection which you are seeing here. So let's use that. For the expense type, we are going to use taxi. I have a reference of an Uber receipt that we are going to use here. So I'm just selecting taxi. Transaction, I am from India, so this is likely not going to change. Amount, this is where we use document understanding. Document data. Within data, we should have total amount. That's what we should use. And for the transaction date, also we can just take it from document understanding. Date. Optionally, you can also select payment type, mostly company paid, which is why you are trying to raise the expense. Vendor, you can also get the vendor name. We saw it, right? So let's select the vendor name from data. Great. You might be seeing some errors, yeah, like I expected. So this is something, if we add a value at the end, that should resolve this error. And also in this property mapping, if I just said value should resolve the error. Now, before I run this activity, I need to create an email, just like I did a few minutes back. You can delete this one. So again, I'm going to impersonate Uber and say expense receipt for Wednesday ride. How about that? And we will also insert the receipt file because that's essential, right? We are going to pass it on to document understanding. So I have a receipt here already. And maybe something like process this. This is not going to be used, but still, that is it. So let's send it to myself. Awesome, I have it here. Dragging it to my inbox. For some reason, it grayed out, so I'll do a quick refresh. And while it refreshes, let's go to Conquer once. So right now, as you can see, so I guess I logged out for some reason. Let me quickly log in. This is our sandbox account. Okay. So right now we only have one expense in Concur, that is this, and no available receipt images, right? So once this activity runs, we can expect to see one more row added as expense, and obviously the receipt that we uploaded. I mean, using this. Okay, so I missed one thing. I need to add another activity, that is upload expense receipt from Concur. This should be an easy step. I'll just take the current file because we are already inside a for each loop. Okay, we should be good to run now. Inside the for each, perhaps inside document understanding activity, done. Added the expense and uploaded the image. Now, if I go to Concur and do a quick refresh, there you go. You see one new expense added for taxi Uber, and the amount is 320.85. Let's also verify it here. Yep, that's it. So we have a 320.85. Okay, I'll quickly rush to the connector builder aspect because I think there's a lot of excitement around that as well. Okay, so for connector builder today, we are going to look at a very simple, Stripe connector that we are going to build. I already have one, but I'm going to delete it and start afresh. So for the connector builder, just to give you some context, you can create your own connector and just once you publish the custom connector, you should be able to get a respective activity pack on top of that. I believe there's something wrong, but we can start with the new one. Okay, so for the start, we can actually use the build the connector from an already existing API definition, whether it is a Swagger file, Postman collection, Open API definition, you name it. You can bring those, if the URL is publicly available, you can just use the from URL and click on continue, it will import. Otherwise, if you have been working on something locally and if you have a Postman collection, you can simply use that to build your connector. And that's what we are going to use here. So like I said, we are going to use Stripe, continue, and it's going to import the whatever we have in the collection, all the endpoints, resources, authentication mechanisms, and there you go. You see all the resources are already brought forward, right? So let's not overcomplicate stuffs, and we are only going to work with invoices today. We are going to rename this a little, maybe Stripe API dev types and just Stripe. Next, we just click on create. So now you have come to the construction of base URL, that is the base of the HTTPS request. And if I go to invoices, I see most of my resources starts with V1. So it's a good idea to just have it there only. You can configure your pagination type. We support offset cursor as well. Moving on to authentication, cancel. Let's save it first. Okay, moving on to authentication, we support all the standard auths, that usually a vendor can support. So OAuth 2, basic, API key, access token, all those we support. Let's start from the scratch. We reset it to default. For Stripe, it is actually personal access token. So, even if we resetted it, it is a default one. But there's a slight difference. Stripe calls this as security key. So we should remain as such. And I guess that's it. We should be good from authentication standpoint. Now coming to the API standpoint, we will look at what we have as the endpoint resource. So we see this is kind of repetitive, so we will just remove this. You can also debug this here. So since I have already set up the authentication, I can authenticate, have a debug experience within the connector builder. So I have the Stripe key already with me that I'm going to use. Great. Just removing the my token, pasting it here. Awesome. We have the connection created. Let's send the request and verify if this works. Awesome. So at this moment, we have authenticated to Stripe and we are seeing data coming, right? But there is one problem here. Now, since this is a get invoices call, obviously, when we do list all of something or list records of something, we expect an array of objects. Now, this data property is going to come into the way, which is why we have to kind of go to response fields and add it as a response key, root key, I'm sorry. And once you have added it and sent a request, you will see that the data has been removed because we have overwritten the vendor response, kind of overrode it. Great. For parameters, I don't think this is really required. So we can delete it. Or if you have some other query parameters, maybe the vendor supports where clause or something like that, you can add these in here. But for this, we are done. All we need to do is publish the connector. You can, just have your own descriptions and icon, documentation URL, whatnot. But let's not do it right now. Oh, description cannot be empty. So let's say dev dives sample publishing right now. You should receive a message. Great. So my connector has been published. Now going back to Studio Web. You need to create a new project. So let's say connector builder. We'll keep it as a manual trigger, and all you need to type is connector builder in order to see what activities we have. So these are all the activities. We are going to select list all records. We will use Stripe. So it's asking for me to connect. I will again go back and pass my token here. Should connect. Awesome, we have a connection. Now we see the invoices object, obviously. And within optional, you see the outputs. All I'm going to do is write line and show that this activity can really fetch the data for you. Maybe amount remaining for the first invoice. Let's run it. Great. So 5,000 is the amount remaining from the list of invoices. I guess that's all what we wanted to showcase. Open to hear any questions and happy to answer them. By the way, if you want, you can always go back to this. We will be sharing this slide with you. So if you want to download the packages of Studio Web, you can always go to this link and download the packages. Also, please don't miss out the next dev dive sessions. And in order to do that, you need to save your seat, and you can you see the link here as well. It's going to be July 27th and June 28th. With that, we will open the question and answer session.
Yes, I have just posted the link on chat to download the packages. And yes, Roy has also posted a link of one of our previous sessions around connection sharing. So you can also go through the recording of that, which is posted on YouTube. The recording for this session will also be uploaded, and it will come to you in next 24 to 48 hours. And we have some of the questions. So Samrat, Roy, so I'm just reading from bottom. So is connection builder faster? Okay, I'm sorry.
I saw Rohit, as connection builder faster, more streamlined than using HTTP REST calls. I highly recommend using connector builder and integration service over the HTTP request activity that you might be using today. That one's been around for a number of years. Some main differences there. For an HTTP request activity, you're going to configure everything within that activity. So if you're thinking about using multiple APIs, or if you want to have users manage their authentication themselves, or if you want to centralize that authentication, it gets really complex the more APIs you bring in, the more activities you have, the more processes you have to manage that within that HTTP request activity. So I would strongly recommend, for more than maybe a one-off activity, I would strongly recommend looking at Connector Builder.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, Roy, you effectively build it once, right? And then you can have your team use that connector or multiple connections across all of your folders. We're also planning on introducing these, once you build a connector via connector builder, you have a custom connector. We'll make sure that those are available in Marketplace as well. So it would be kind of a new artifact that you could then go ahead and download custom connectors from other customers, or download that same custom connector into another tenant. So it will definitely decrease the amount of time that you spend within individual automations, and then I think make it easier to collaborate with your team members.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Scott. And hey, Scott, while you're answering stuff, I think there was a question around the interesting OpenAI use cases.
Yeah, totally. I think that honestly, what I have, and by the way, I'm Scott Schoenberg. I also work on the integration service team. I guess I'll put my my camera on here. Yeah, we deployed the OpenAI connector and the Azure OpenAI connector as well a couple months ago. Have seen an explosion of interest and usage, to be expected, right? But in terms of use cases, I've seen a lot of folks very much interested in using those connectors for content generation. However, in terms of actually deploying those types of automation into production, there is a little bit of hesitancy, which is totally understandable, considering models can, as they say, hallucinate, right? So they can come up with information that's absolutely inaccurate, or kind of just stretching the truth, right? And so more than content generation, I've seen a lot more use cases around summary. So kind of feeding models a blurb of text and then getting a summarization of that text. Likewise, getting, kind of extracting information from a piece of text, and doing classification as well. So I think the use cases are really limitless. However, you do need to do quite a bit of testing and make sure that the outputs are meaningful and safe, right, for your particular I guess, automation. With that being said, we are kind of looking into ways to make it easier for you to work with embedded models. So this would be the means by which you would input proprietary data and then also be able to get proprietary data out. Now, some folks might not be super comfy with doing that via OpenAI, but that's also the reason why we made the connector available via the Azure OpenAI connector as well. And we're working on the other major LLM providers, so stay tuned.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Real quick, I want to address, we've been addressing some questions in chat. There's one question on using it for unattended robots. Yes, absolutely. Use it for your unattended robots. That's what connection sharing is for. So you can create those connections in a folder that robot has access to, and they'll be able to use those connections by default. So great question, but it's meant for both attended and unattended automations. And there were questions on just Academy availability. There are courses in the Academy. There's other webinars that we've done that are posted up on YouTube. And then, of course, if there's requests on specific details that anyone wants, please let us know. We're happy to do as many webinars as needed.
Awesome. And if there are more questions which are not answered, in case we missed out, please unmute yourself and ask the question. That's totally fine. If you're shy, you can still post it on chat. That's fine.
For questions on authentication, we do automatically refresh and re-authenticate. So, for example, for OAuth, we'll go through and we'll refresh that connection. If you're hard coding or using your own secret key and putting that in the bearer token, that's a little bit different. My experience is usually those don't refresh and change very often. But for something like an OAuth flow, those types of tokens do change, and we have logic and integration service that automatically handles that.
There are a couple new questions. Can anyone access UiPath data that insights are built on via the connector?
Not at the moment, but it's a great point. I'll put that down for the team.
Okay. Yeah, meanwhile, we can an admin role oversee these studio web processes which are unpublished? It's a question from Naveen.
Let's see.
No, I don't think that's possible right now. The projects are very tenant. I mean, on a particular user account level. I don't think that's quite possible right now, but that's a good point. We can take this feedback. But also, I would like to understand why this is a requirement. If you can type in or unmute yourself.
Naveen, can you unmute maybe? Meanwhile,
Yeah,
Roy,
absolutely.
Roy, there is one question from Satya. Maybe we can answer that on chat while Naveen is asking the question.
Yeah, I would definitely see this is coming from Microsoft Power Automate because it is a limitation there. I'll tell you an example. Like there are a couple of processes which are developed in Microsoft Power Automate within our team, and the team member has left the organization without sharing that Power Automate, and no one can handle or make adjustments to that. If that functionality has been added to the studio web process, like an admin role can oversee the unpublished or published activities, that would be read without even getting shared.
I see. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great feedback. Thank you, Naveen.
Yeah.
Sure. We'll take it as feedback, Naveen. Thanks.
Yes, I think we don't have any more questions as such. I had previously shared the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers and the organizers on the chat. So please go through that and connect with with our experts. So I'm sure there will be more questions for you as and when you start experiencing the integration service, and so you can be active with them and share your feedback with us as well. I think yeah, okay, there is one more question, and maybe we can wrap it after that. How far are we before releasing a stable release? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick distinction. Integration service is available today and is stable. It's general availability, and we release new connectors monthly. So keep an eye on that. I think this might be a question around connector builder. Keep an eye out for over the next, I'd say, couple of weeks, maybe month, and you'll see that come through.
Yeah, connector builder is already in preview, but we plan to general announce that really soon. So that's Roy is right.
Yep. And David, thank you. I'll reach out.
Awesome. I'll stop the recording.